Good Sunday morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church in Eugene. My name is Phyllis O'Neill. I use the pronouns she and her. I'm a senior woman with what my sister calls muddy blonde hair, curly, and I'm wearing a white blouse and a multicolored skirt. We gather in worship to remember, because we all get caught up in the busyness of our lives. Sometimes we forget. So we come to remember our deepest selves and our highest aspirations. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever your image of the holy, we're glad you're here. Right after the service, you're invited to our welcome room, which is in the south foyer. Longtime members, first-time visitors, and anyone in between is invited to come there and mingle. There's also a low stimulation room directly behind us in the chapel. Against the back wall, there's a collection of fidget spinners and activities for anyone who needs them. If you're online, a link to our visitor form is being dropped into the chat now. You can always use your cell phones to access a copy of the order of service by scanning. Oh, there's a QR code, I think, on the door and at various places throughout the building. There you can get a copy, information about the anthems and the resources used in our service. So Jackson is going to help us with the chalice lighting this morning. Thank you, Jackson.
We light the chalice, symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith, with words from John O'Donohue.
We light the chalice, symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith, with words from John O'Donohue. There is a quiet light that shines in every heart. It draws no attention to itself, though it is always secretly there.
It's what brings, illuminates our minds to see beauty, our desire to seek possibility, and our hearts to love life.
It is what illuminates our minds to see beauty, our desire to seek possibility, and our hearts to love life. Without this subtle quickening, our days would be empty and wearisome, and no horizon would ever awaken our longing. Our passion for life is quietly sustained from somewhere in us that is wedded to the energy and excitement of life.
This high inner light is what enables us to recognize and receive our very presence here as blessing.
This shy inner light is what enables us to recognize and receive our very presence here as a blessing. And now, let us say together the words of our mission, which affirms our shared purpose. Empowered by love, we transform ourselves and serve our world.
Thank you, Teacher Ryan, for telling us that story, and good morning to everyone. My name is Jen Youngsun, and I am lucky enough to serve this congregation as its minister. I use the pronouns she and her. And for those of us in our community who have low eyesight or no eyesight, or perhaps don't have their videos on, I have kind of shoulder length salt and pepper hair. I'm wearing some glasses, and I've got a bright blue stole on today with chalice on one side and a rising sun on the other. First, I want to thank Chris Olson and the worship team for leading last week's service so that I could go on vacation. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I heard it was a really great experience. You all gathered in circles and had conversations with each other to talk about how we can be more open and inclusive and welcoming, especially through the perspective of classism. So all the notes from your tables are now pinned to the wall, the north wall of the social hall there. So I hope that all of us can take a look at the notes there and carry forward the pieces that are ours to take. So for today's service, it all started at the auction. And at this year's auction, I offered up a sermon on any topic. And the person who won that bid didn't actually want to just tell me, please preach on this topic. Instead, he did this lovely thing and invited me to a conversation. Well, it was hours of conversation, actually, that spanned 2 meetings at a local cafe. And it was really wonderful to get to know him better and just to explore this whole range of possible topics. So as we were talking, one of those subjects just struck me. It just felt like the right thing at the right time. And that brings us here to Sunday's worship theme, which is about endings. So I recently finished a novel. It was so good that when I got to the last page, I read that last page really slowly because I didn't really want it to end. But okay, the end has to come sooner or later. And then I closed the back of this hardcover book, and then I just sat there and kind of relished that feeling like, that was so good. That whole thing was so good, so well written, such a great story, so satisfying. So books can be like that, right? A great meal can feel like that sometimes. You get to the end of this great meal and you're like, that was great. The end of movies, right? The end of, like the final episode of a long-running series, right? In music, there are often really good endings, like this morning's opening hymn, right? Where those last chords kind of round the corner and let you know we're coming to the end, and then it just goes, we're finished. Yeah, just like that, right? So can you think of other examples where you felt like that, where you've got to the end of something and you just went, so satisfying. So a reunion of retired teacher friends, and then the event is over and you get in your car and you look back and go, that was great, right? Yeah.
Finally finish a knitting project you've been working on.
When you get to the end of a knitting project you've been working on, you just like, oh, wow, I'm done. Yeah.
An evening around a campfire with really good friends.
Oh, when you get to the end of a day and this is the end of all your activities and you're gathered around a campfire with all of your friends. Very satisfying.
Finishing a big Lego project.
Finishing a big Lego project. And then you didn't lose any pieces and you put that last piece in. Like, so good. So good. I think there's something very basic and innate about our longing for a good ending, right? Oh, please don't let the ending be confusing or messy or insignificant. And even if that ending is going to be tragic or mysterious or open-ended, at least, please, let us try to make some meaning from that. We try very hard, I think, to make good endings, to even have a good death. You can see it in the art we make and the stories we tell and the songs we write and the lives that we craft for ourselves and for our families. Now, I know it's a cliche to say, well, everything ends. And I feel like it is worth repeating that we live our lives in between the beginning and the end of things. That we live between the rising and the setting of the sun, between the exhale and the inhale, and between the remembering and the forgetting. So come, let us contemplate endings and the end of things. Come, let us worship together. So it's been a while since we've practiced our metta. And so I want to invite you into a time of guided meditation. First, let me remind you that we have a Joys and Sorrows area over there in the corner, and at any point you can write something in the book, you can place a stone in water, you can light a candle. Today I want to lift up the names of two of our friends. First, I just heard that our friend Grace Hart had a stroke recently and is in rehab. And then we also heard that our friend Robin Shantz Mulford is in the hospital right now after having a small heart attack. I saw him in the hospital this morning and he was up eating breakfast, so I think he's on the mend. But he will appreciate, and Grace will also appreciate, your prayers of healing. So for those who are not familiar with metta, it's from the Buddhist tradition, and it is a practice of generating and strengthening loving kindness. And we begin by directing loving kindness toward ourselves, because all spiritual searching begins here, in the home of our own heart. And I know that for some, it takes a lot of practice to find delight for ourselves and to truly enjoy the company of our own hearts. And so we practice. As you're willing and able, please find a comfortable position. Close your eyes if you're not too sleepy this morning. Otherwise, you can keep them open kind of halfway. Notice the breath that comes in. Notice the breath that goes out. Bring attention to yourself, maybe as if you were looking into a mirror. Fill your heart with compassion for yourself. For you are worthy to be loved. When we feel more positive and accepting and kind and patient toward ourselves, only then can we be more compassionate and loving toward others. Say to yourself, may I be happy. May I be well. May I be at peace. And now bring your mind to your friends, family, loved ones, people who are closest to you, people who are easy for you to love. All of that compassion and love that you generated for yourself, now pour out to them. For Robin and his family, for Grace and her loved ones. Let's also bring to mind all those who need some extra love and support today. I know that here in our congregation, there are those who are struggling with financial issues, and we've got friends dealing with anxiety and depression. Sometimes, well, many times, it's not obvious the pain that our friends are carrying. So to our friends and to our loved ones, let us say to them, may you be happy. May you be well. May you be at peace. Next, bring to your mind all of our neighbors, all of our kin, human and otherwise, here in our city, in our state, in our country, all over the world, for we are one on this tiny blue dot. There are people all over the globe who are suffering under tyranny and war, people impacted by floods and fire, deadly heat. Let us send them our cultivated loving kindness, and we say to them, may you be happy. May you be well. May you be at peace. And finally, we acknowledge that if I have hurt anyone, knowingly or unknowingly, in thought, word, or deed, I ask for their forgiveness. And if anyone has hurt me, knowingly or unknowingly, in thought, in word, or deed, to the best of my ability, I extend my forgiveness. May it be so. Blessed be. Amen. I didn't want that to end, Suzanne. That was really pretty. You know, as an abstract idea, I think that most of us are aware that everything ends, right? I mean, we know, for example, that all marriages end one way or another. Every job ends. Every story ends. And no pair of Levi's is going to last forever, right? And yet, for some reason, endings still catch us off guard, leaving us kind of stunned. How? Why? As if the world weren't ending all the time, every moment, every breath, leaving hints in plain sight everywhere. Yes, endings can leave us feeling surprised and kind of caught off guard and unprepared. Endings can also leave us feeling deprived sometimes and grieving. Other times, the end can bring a sense of relief. Ah, the end of 100-degree days. Whew. Ah, the end of pain, conflict, or stress. And then we had those endings that we talked about earlier, endings that give us that sense of, love it, so great. Satisfied, right? Endings don't always land with a sense of closure or completeness, like ending on a root chord, right? The end can be a slightly open door, a question, a beginning, the bud of a bud. Can we know for sure when we've come to the end? Was it a happy ending? Maybe, maybe not. Too soon to say? It depends on your idea of time, right? We tend to think of time in a very linear fashion, point A, point B. But can beginnings and endings be circular and spiral and fractal and some other kind of geometry? We know that our individual life will end. We know that the reign of earthly creatures will end. We know that one day the sun will expand into a big red giant and eat up the planets along its path, right? The world is always ending, and it's ending all around us. The end of species, the end of indigenous languages, and with that, the end of knowledge, the end of habitats, the end of fertile soil, the end of democracy? Maybe, maybe not. I know that a lot of you have grown weary of hope. And a lot of people that I talk to these days are feeling waves of cynicism and pessimism and despair that just saps all of their energy. It's too late, they say. The world is too messed up. What is the point of even trying or caring or hoping? It's just going to come crashing down anyway. Maybe, maybe not. So there's this wonderful poet named Saeed Jones. Born in 1985, he gives voice to his generation, writing that for now we are alive. For now we are alive at the end of the world, shell-shocked by headlines and alarm clocks, burning through what little love we have left. We are seeing collapse and destabilization, peril and calamity, and there are still human beings who keep going about the business of trying to make sense of their lives. He leaves the door open just a little bit, enough for the light to come through. There is a group that's been meeting here at the church recently from the Creative Spirit Collaborative in town. It's an open group, and church members are invited to join them. Their next meeting is the last day of the month, the 31st. You can find it on our calendar. It's a group for people who are experiencing climate anxiety. And it's a chance for folks to just be able to express themselves honestly and to share feelings in a supportive group and together find enough light to keep them going. Humans have been thinking about the end of the world for a very long time. As a species, we have been going through collapse and calamity and despair and destabilization, peril, over and over and over again. And so it makes sense that throughout human history, we have invented lots of stories about the end times. I mean, how could all of creation possibly end with just a gigantic asteroid or the death of our sun? That's not a very good ending, right? It's gonna need, we need a story with a little more like vavoom. So nearly all of the world's religions have views about the end of days, the end of time, and maybe none so more popular than the story that arose from a group of conservative Christians in the 19th century here in the United States. The name of this new conservative movement, fundamentalism. And at its core was a belief that the second coming of Jesus was imminent, and that certain parts of the Bible, like the book of Revelation, read literally, contained veiled messages that would predict the final unfolding of human history. According to Protestant fundamentalists, these messages reveal that human history can be divided into 7 periods, or what they call dispensations, starting with Adam and Eve. We are presently in the 6th dispensation, which is marked by moral decline and a vast number of Unitarian Universalists. Any day now, without warning, a cataclysmic event called the rapture will occur, during which only the true Christians will suddenly be beamed up to some place. And at the rapture, true believers will then meet Jesus in heaven, where they will hang out together for 7 years. Meanwhile, back on earth, there will be a time of great tribulation. Suffering will be everywhere upon the earth, and everybody on earth will be under the rule of one government, one world government, led by the Antichrist. Now, at the end of those 7 years, Jesus will then return with his army of faithful believers to battle the Antichrist and have this holy war called Armageddon. And after winning that battle, Jesus will then restore the earth to full health. Everything that was destroyed will become new again. And Jesus will then reign over this kingdom with Jerusalem as its capital for the next 1,000 years. This will be the 7th and final era of human history. At the end of those 1,000 years, that's when the last judgment takes place, sending individuals to either heaven or hell for an eternity. And the last judgment will be the final event of human history, the end of days, the end of time. Now, this ending satisfies a lot of people. It gives them that feeling of, this is good. It gives them clear answers about what is going to happen. It assures them that life and death, their individual life and death, are part of a great, wonderful story, and that we are not just specks of cosmic dust. So today, this end times fascination with this story has spread beyond just fundamentalist Christians. A recent Pew Research survey shows that 39% of all Americans believe that we are in the end times. And then 47% of Christians believe that we are definitely in the end times. Well, so we could say, That's fine. Everybody has the right to believe what they want to believe, and we'll just leave them alone, right? I mean, I don't have to believe that, but they're okay. We'll just let them be. But there is a problem with holding this particular story, because this particular story promotes intolerance of others, promotes violence, and promotes a complete disregard for the environment. The end time story just cannot tolerate those who disagree with it, because it draws such clear lines between good and evil, saved and damned. And so every conflict between us and them turns into a moral conflict. We are God's people doing God's work. They are Satan's people doing the work of evil. We can do anything to them that we want, because all tactics are fair when fighting a holy war. This apocalyptic worldview also promotes war as necessary and even desirable. If you've ever tried to read the book of Revelations, anyone tried to read this book? It's basically unreadable. But you will remember there are really graphic, violent images all throughout. The sea becomes blood, there's a lake of fire, there's so much warfare and violence. And through the ages, our political and religious leaders have borrowed those images and those phrases, and you'll hear them repeated in the public square. You'll hear people saying things like, the American mission and divine appointment to rid the world of evil, to justify war and to support the spread of the American empire. This end times fascination also leads to apathy about the current needs of the earth and its people. It says, if the world is going to soon be destroyed, then what is the point of taking care of it? I don't really need to recycle or care about climate change. Jesus is going to restore the earth, and it will be wonderful. So why be concerned about deforestation or extinction of species? The end times mentality also breeds a culture of disengagement about the needs of the people. What's really interesting is that you can find the same kind of disengagement on the other side with doomers. Have you heard this term, doomers? Yeah, yep. These are people who feel so pessimistic about the world and its future that they have just given up trying to even engage with it or care about it at all. If people only expect the progress of evil, why would they want to work for social justice? If people only expect the extinction of species and the destruction of the planet, then they'll have little motivation to take positive action toward or for the environment. So, most biblical scholars will tell you that the book of Revelation is a commentary on the Roman Empire and its domination of the world, not as a prediction of what's going to happen in the future. The book of Revelation describes something that was happening to this particular band of Christians. They weren't even called Christians then. They were Jesus followers in the 2nd century in Asia Minor. It reveals the thinking of its author. We think the author was John of Patmos. He was a passionate follower of Jesus, so passionate that he got himself locked up in jail. He was exiled to a prison island in the Aegean Sea for preaching the message of love. Now, this was a relatively mild punishment, for had he been alive during his grandfather's day, during the time of Nero, he probably would have been fed to the lions, because they did that to Christians. But this was the 2nd century, where the Roman Empire was ruled by the so-called 5 good emperors. Even so, it was a dangerous time for the followers of Jesus, since everybody in that land who they were required to worship the emperor. So in this land, which is now Western Turkey, there were several fledgling groups of Jesus followers, and they operated kind of undercover. During this time, the economy was booming. Life was pretty comfortable for those early Jesus followers. And from his island exile, from his prison, John was watching all of the small nascent churches and watching them become very complacent and not heeding the cries of the enslaved people. He watched them grow complacent toward the poor. He watched them grow very comfortable living in the emperor's land. He watched them move away from the essential teachings of Jesus and toward worship of the emperor himself. So where Jesus taught nonviolence, Rome taught war. Where Jesus taught egalitarianism, Rome taught class stratification. Where Jesus taught gifts of the Spirit, Rome taught the spoils of conquest. And he saw all this happening, and he was getting more and more concerned about economic exploitation and violence, and he just became so angry and frustrated, and he's in prison. He just doesn't know what to do. People had been so wrapped up in their comfort, and he knew that he would have to do something really extraordinary to get their attention, and that's why he wrote an apocalypse. So an apocalypse was a literary genre, one commonly used by Jews and early Christians. He used that form because he knew that, he knew his audience. He knew how to get their attention. He knew that they could not be shaken out of their complacency by a simple letter or a nice little poem. So he used fantastic and frightening images to chastise and alarm his audience. He wanted them to choose. He wanted them to choose God over the emperor. He wanted them to choose a life of service to other people instead of a life of material comfort for themselves, a life of spirit over a life of possessions, a life of peace over lust for war. But he knew that he was asking them to expose themselves to danger and persecution and hardship. He knew he was asking them to put their lives on the line, and so he had to promise a glorious future, some sort of reward. If you do this, then you'll get this in return. He gave them a way of making a meaning out of their mortal death by making it part of an eternal life. It seems like we all need that sense of deep purpose and deep meaning, a sense that my little life somehow matters in the great scheme of things. I think we all feel that, right? The world will end one day, and you and I will also come to an end. But who has time to consider those horrors? That's what the poet Billy Collins wrote one day. He said, who has time to think about apocalypse and the end of the world when the world's body keeps pressing us up against us with the weight of its beauty, its dizzying sea cliffs, its coastal birds, its rolling fairways, and deep pine woods. Here, in this breath in, and here in this breath out, we find that we live between the endings and the beginnings, between the waxing and the waning, between the rising and the falling away. As human beings, we are co-creators of this life, and we cannot be complacent, waiting passively for a future to arrive. We create this world that we live in. And so, while we are here, for as long as we are here, let us vow to live as deeply as we can. Stretch our hearts toward our longing and love as wildly as we can. Can we do that? Amen. Amen. And blessed be. And now, as Phyllis helps to extinguish our chalice, we'll say our closing words together. We extinguish this flame, not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And I want to leave you with these final words from T.S. Eliot from the back of our hymnal. What we call a beginning is often the end, and to make an end is to make a beginning. The end is where we start from. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know that place for the first time. Please do greet your neighbors if you have not met them yet, and go in love and go in peace, everyone.